Natalie, I am so excited for this conversation, and also I thought maybe it would be relevant to say right out of the gate, like, why is it important to have conversations around trauma in the body?
For me, trauma in the body where it is stored is like a roadmap. I am able to go back and associate the different parts of my body that are talking to me, where I have aches and pains and just build up over sustained stress over time. If I can go back and acknowledge and give compassion to that part and that memory, then I can rewrite my future moving forward. So it's really important to know where we came from so we can address it and rewrite going forward.
That makes sense. I don't know if it's because our society is so fast-paced and moving that we just forget this intrinsic existence of mind-body connection and leave the body behind, and that like our body stores so much for us and so much to keep us safe, and it's affected by life in such a dynamic way. We think, oh, my brain, like, I'm existing, I'm fine, so I'll just keep moving on, when in fact, like, the body is just storing all of this. And why do you think it's so easy for us to forget that?
I think we are in a society of human doing, and we have forgotten how to just be a human being. That is our sole purpose, is just to be and experience and go through this life. Yet in society, we are pressured to always be going, always be producing, always manufacturing something. We're never told just to slow down and reset and just be. And that is a huge pressure I've felt, and I know a lot of people I've talked to have felt, but it's really comparison to just, we need to be human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we don't have the environment, I think, that encourages that, and therefore we push on, move on, and don't, acknowledge, realize that the body hasn't, and in fact, it in some ways can even start holding on tighter because of that allostatic load. So before going on, I think it's really important that we all start on the same page and talk about what exactly is trauma, because it is brought up so much. Like, you go through Instagram, you can barely pass something that's about, oh, trauma this, trauma that, and it can be such a trigger word for previous generations who would just say, like, yeah, you all think trauma is anything. But it's so important to acknowledge what it exactly is, because then we can just come at it from a more like pragmatic angle. Like, we're not trying to over dramatize anything. We're just trying to heal and resolve so that we can move on and truly show up the way that we want to.
You're right. And the first step is awareness. And according to the Psych Institute, the definition of trauma is anything that overwhelms our nervous system's ability to cope in the present environment. Whether that is experiencing a traumatic event or witnessing it, it has the capacity to store in our imprint in our body, both physically and mentally. And it's a sliding scale. So trauma is not linear. It affects everybody differently. It's about the human experience. You can have two firefighters responding to the same critical incident. One walks away just fine, whereas the other person walks away and they have nightmares and flashbacks. It's all about the response in their body. It's not about weakness or anything else. It's about their response.
And I think it's so important also to clarify that we're all different because we do have different experiences. So the one person who walks away fine, maybe there was nothing in that event that their body actually remembered, and so they're fine. But for this other firefighter, there are things that the body remembered, and so it's not just simply responding to that call, it's responding to the things that were in the past and in the background. And so this is why, like, between first responders, it's like, oh yeah, a really bad call for me would be this, or a really bad call for me would be this. I remember when I was an EMT, like just getting into it, and I was working for AMR and, trying to be the poised, like know something EMT. And I walked into this, we went on someone on hospice, and the caregiver had given them too much pain medication, and so their blood pressure was like super low. But it was clear, like, we could not do anything because this person was on hospice. But what got me was when all the family members started showing up, all the siblings, there were like 7 of them, all older, all start crying, "Oh, Mom," it was their mom. And they were so emotional because, like, it was clear their mom was dying. And, like, even though she was on hospice, they weren't prepared for it. And I noticed myself going into this space of, like, imagining myself as one of those siblings and what I would do if that was my mom. And I got so emotional. And I think, like, for me, because my mom is such a dear and special person to me, like, that was a micro trigger. And I had to, like, take a deep breath, say, like, this is not my emergency. This is not my story, and send them love. But the people that I was with, they didn't respond that way at all, but we have different stories. I think another thing that we have to remember is, like, we're not trying to make something bigger than it is, and also acknowledge that trauma is a big deal. But that said, it's not a bad day. It's not a rough season. It's really when there are events or core memories in which we don't have the resources to move on from that. And so when we're looking back at a rough day versus, a core memory, how do you correlate the difference between those two?
It's interesting, the example you gave, because I can see the similarities in having so many siblings showing up to see their mom and be in that last couple days and those time together. For me, that would have been a different experience because I didn't have a big family and siblings. So for me, I would see that, I would feel really good in that situation because she has so much family surrounding her and how peaceful of a way to go out.
Interesting.
So it's different, our nervous systems, because I grew up in a really troubled home. My mom was in and out of prison, and we don't have that connection.
Yeah.
So for me, I look at it and I see the blessings all around me. And so just in that example right there, we're 2 different humans, 2 different experiences coming into this. And you look at that experience and that, someday in the future, like, that is what it's going to look like. Mm-hmm. You and your brothers and sisters are so close, you're all going to be there. For me, it's not going to look like that, so I don't have that association.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show it's all about our origination and where we came from.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, it's amazing.
And for me, like, I didn't know how bothered I was by the situation until I started tearing up, until I started, like, getting that sense of overwhelm and, like, emotionality, but that also came from my body.
That's your emotional part of your body,
yes.
Not your logic brain.
Yes.
Because logically, we're not in that situation, We're not in that environment, but our body recognizes it, and it's like an overused machine. It has that memory to it. So it's going to have that muscle memory. And so trauma is going to bring up that muscle memory again. It's going to resurface every single time it's activated by memory. Whether we logically understand or not, our bodies are going to happen. That's how it's wired to keep functioning.
Yeah, and it's stored there. So recognizing that, like, we can't logic our way out of those core traumatic memories / experiences. It just needs to be processed and it needs to be supported.
I like how you said it needs to be processed.
Yes.
Because I have gone about it just pushing it down. Oh, this is coming up. I'm going to push it down, ignore it, and power it through. And what you said about processing it is huge because it allows the complete circle of the system for when you activate it, how it responds in your body, and then letting it go.
Why do you think that we take that pressure on ourselves to just stuff it down, push through?
I think for me, a lot of it comes from being a female in the trades. I feel like I have this added pressure to not be sensitive, to not be emotional, to not be anything that a stereotypical woman is. Because what I'm doing is coming to a position as a firefighter, and I'm not supposed to bring my identity or my sex to it, right? I'm just a firefighter. Well, I'm a human in a firefighter role. You can't take away my humanism. Emotions are not, everybody has emotions. So why are we suppressing them and not just allowing them to go through its complete cycle, how God intended us to use our emotions and cycle through? Let's let that process complete and stop interrupting it and furthering our recovery. I mean, it can be years before it comes up again, but when you're activated, it's going to be the same exact response, whether it's now, today, tomorrow, or 10 years from now.
One of my therapists said, things come up to come out.
Yeah.
And so instead of, if things keep, things that we resist persist.
Yes, they do.
I love that quote.
Yep.
Because it gives us that encouragement of like, hey, you don't like this feeling? Let's just feel into it, let it come up and let it go. Otherwise, you're going to keep feeling it.
Yeah, well, like carbonation in a bottle. You go to open it and it starts to carbonate and have all that pressure. You have to open the cap to let the pressure out. It's just like trauma. We keep living, so we keep experiencing, and our tank, our vessel, our body keeps filling up and pressurizing. We have to let go of some of that pressure and that trauma.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That said, the idea that trauma gets stored in the body and that the body remembers all these details, maybe we can set up for how that happens with the nervous system states. So what are those states? Can you describe for us, when we're safe, what does that feel like, and what is our body doing versus when we are upregulated?
I think the easiest one to start with, because we can all relate as women in this field, is your sympathetic system, your fight or flight, where you have that superpower. Your body is passing through more blood and you have higher blood flow. Your blood vessels are dilating. Your heart is beating faster. You actually create a anti-inflammatory in your body that will help you to repair any damages you get as if you're in a fight. And then you have your opposite end of that, where you have parasympathetic mode, which is complete, almost shutdown, where it's like your body's relaxed and rest, and you're rest and digest to where you're safe and you can actually shut down and rest your eyes and rest.
And your body can get restoration.
Yes, and repair. And then you have your baseline, which is where you're maintaining the most self-led responses, so you can come from a place of responding instead of reacting. Reacting is way more sympathetic, and it's coming to that we have to fix this or we're going to die. It's that life or death situation.
It's the emotional amygdala side of our brain.
Exactly. Yep. And the closer we can come to our baseline where we're functioning, then the less practices we have to do to actually rest and digest. Versus if we're turned on really high and our system's going, we have to do these in a little bit more intentional practices to bring ourselves down, because it's just like a pendulum. If you're so far on one side, you need a lot more to get to the other side. Mm-hmm. Versus if you're just sitting in the middle, it's not going to take as much to turn it on and accelerate when you need, or slow down when you don't need.
Yeah. And the idea of so many first responders going into burnout, what happens with burnout in the nervous system?
Burnout is when your system completely collapses. Mm-hmm. It is a dorsal vagal response where it collapses. So this is when you, almost like a child would throw a tantrum. This is a very good illustration of a dorsal vagal response where everything is shut down, they feel hopeless. The tears are coming, you can't think clearly, you actually have brain fog, and your body is so overwhelmed with chemicals and hormones that you can't think clearly enough to react. Mm-hmm. So you come to this point where you just shut down. You can't run, you can't fight or fly, freeze, you're absolutely stuck in that moment. And I've been there. It feels like the end of the world.
Really does.
It really does. But like anything, it's a wave, right? It waves, crests, and then it washes back from the shore. It can only last so long. So even though it feels like it's going to last forever and it's crushing the end of the world, if we sit in that pain and we allow our bodies to fully process and let all of the tears and everything pass through and complete its process, then we actually feel better and we can start swinging the other direction again.
Now, I've heard that with trauma, part of the issue that happens with the nervous system specifically is that the trauma doesn't allow us to complete the normal stress response. So do you have an analogy, like a way that you visualize this that helps that make more sense?
Yeah, kind of like the brake analogy and the accelerator. Imagine driving a car. Well, you can't jump in a car and just floor it and drive wherever you want. You cannot rev up your engine that much, and wear and tear on your mechanism and your body is going to be too much. So it's just like driving a car. Sometimes you need to get up and go, and you need to speed up to pass somebody or get into a safe environment. But on the other token, you need to be able to slow down so you don't rear end somebody, crash into a wall. And your car just cannot be running at 6th gear all the time. I mean, it's just going to fall apart and wear down. Well, our body is the exact same. It's the vessel in which it carries us.
Before we started talking, you were describing me this idea of a circuit.
Yeah, so our body is made up of a million different pathways, and it's all runs through our fascia, which is like saran wrap that holds our whole body together. It runs from the tip of your toes all the way to the top of your head. And let's say you stub your toe, that pain signal runs through a highway all the way through your entire body up to your brain where you register, ow, that hurt. Well, imagine if...
And then you get super angry.
Super angry, yes. And then you hobble around. Imagine if that traumatic event happens. It's like shorts your body to where it can't process and cope to what is going on in the environment, so it gets stuck. So now the next time you have that pain signal or receptor and it tries to go on that same highway along that fascia, it hits that spot that was stuck before, and it's like a roadblock. So now it has to take a detour and go around it to complete its cycle so that you can register in your brain that you stubbed your toe. So imagine driving your highway from the tip of your toe up to your brain, and you come across this roadblock and you got to go all the way around. Well, that's inconvenient, and it's going to continuously wear to where that detour becomes a main road. So now what was intended to be our natural flow is no longer, and it can barely be accessed because of this roadblock. It's going to take a lot of demolition to clear that, just like it would on a road or construction.
That totally makes sense, which also explains the trauma isn't necessarily the thing that happens to us. It's what happens inside of us as a result of that thing.
It is simply the biological response in our body to a circumstance.
Now, stress, the difference between stress and trauma, that's also a really important distinction, because we can go through really stressful times and it is not traumatic in the same way.
It's just like the stress on our bodies is like the stress on our vehicles. If we were running it in 6th gear, like we talked about earlier, and just full blown going out, well, we're going to get that stress on our vehicle. We're going to wear and tear and need to do a lot more maintenance. Same with our body, but sometimes, just like in a car, you need to be going and you need to be on autopilot to get to where you're going. And as long as it's safe and clear to do so, you can set your cruise control and go. That's like stress. We learn to cope and how to drive in those situations to keep going. However, sometimes, just like in traffic, people are everywhere, there's blocks everywhere. You got to slow down, and it's inevitable.
But the difference with trauma is that we can get the gear stuck.
And then we can no longer accelerate. We have to actually slow down, put it in park, and take it to the shop to get repair, right? Just like we would tune up on our brain. I compared it to like an oil change. Just like you would do an oil change on your car for maintenance, you need to have that oil change in your brain and go to therapy or confide in a friend or someone you're close with and you trust to discuss whatever gear you're stuck in, let's dump that out just like we would take our car in for a tune-up so we can be functioning as we're supposed to.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, that visual. I love The Body Keeps the Score. I think it took me a year to get through that book finally, but when I did, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. And I love his quote that trauma is not the story of something that happened back then. It's the current imprint of that pain on the mind, brain, and body. So, it is still there.
It makes me think of, I heard this once, I can't remember where from, but when you are remembering a childhood memory, a lot of the times you're remembering the memory of it. So you're not actually remembering the moment and when it happened, you're remembering the last time you thought about it. So it's like the short little memory that pops up in your head of when you're 3 years old and you're holding that bike. Well, you're actually remembering the photo of you holding that bike and you're all excited, it's your 3rd birthday. We don't actually have that memory in our logical brain yet. So we're remembering that photo of the memory.
Oh, that's really interesting. And speaking of memories, like this idea that these memories being stored in our body is what our body is responding to, like we said earlier, with when we go on it doesn't even necessarily need to be something traumatic, like in my example, but it could be the relationship between, so my story, the oldest daughter and her mother, and she was calling the other siblings to get there. Or it could be you smell the cologne of that smelled very similar to someone who was close to you and passed in a tragic way. Like, all of our senses have these, for lack of a better word, like stories that are associated, and so it can bring us back to those places. So then in our mind we're like, oh, I'm fine, but the memories have so much information that are stored from our senses. They can be these little triggers that continue throughout the course of our life. And so when we have this big explosion over, something small that happens with our spouse, well, we're not exploding in that situation. We're exploding because of the, putting our fingers in this infected wound. That's actually what we're responding to.
One thing that came up in my therapy recently that I have a lot of awareness around is I grew up in hoarder conditions in my biological mother's house. And she, having been a drug addict and people in and out of the home all the time, now fast forward 20 years, I'm a firefighter and I'm responding to hoarder home conditions.
All the time.
Low income houses, really dirty conditions in which children are living. And well, for me, this is affecting my nervous system every single call because it remembers what it was like to live in that. So although logically I don't live in that anymore, I have a house, I have a career, I'm 20 years past that memory, my body doesn't understand it's on a timeline. Mm-hmm. That trauma is not linear, it's just stored in there. So it takes me back as if I'm a child coming into my home. So now fast forward 15-year career, think of all the homes I've been in and all the triggering that I've had. And of course, what did I do? I just stuffed it down. As soon as I'd be irritable in this, I just need a nap. Mm-hmm. Well, what I needed was to tell somebody, hey, walking into that house today made me feel like my childhood home. Maybe if I had just said those simple words and shared what emotion was going on, I wouldn't have had this long time where my pressure canister was overflowed and then complete explosion, dorsal vagal collapse. I had a breakdown.
And what's interesting about that is you had an awareness around that, but even when you don't have an awareness around it, it still impacts your nervous system. So this is why, again, we can go have a shift that seems like it's low stress strain and go home and just be wiped out, because in the background, our body is still going through all of this. It's just without our awareness, but it will bring fatigue and like hardship to the body. And that's why, like you said, it starts with awareness. And the more aware we can become, the more we can also give those supports. And secondary trauma is a really interesting thing too, because in some ways I find it like a little bit more nuanced, right? Like it's like secondhand smoke where we're not the ones smoking. So we're not, I think it's a lot harder to be deliberate about adding support because it's not quote unquote happening to us. But in fact, like there's a lot of research out there that secondary trauma can be almost just as impactful as trauma to us. I think part of it is because we're intended to be so connected as humans and so supportive of one another. I think that's partially why like soldiers go out and they're in battle and they see these horrible things and they come back with PTSD or PTSI. And even though like maybe they weren't blown up, maybe they weren't shot, but because their buddies were, that still imprints in their nervous system. And so it's extremely relevant to first responders because we have what the statistic is like 300 to 600 secondary traumas that we'll see in the course of a 25 year career. And that is significantly far and above what the average civilian goes through.
I think the average civilian goes through 3 to maybe 7 traumatic events in their entire life, compared to the 300 to 600 like you mentioned.
And even though they're secondary traumas, like I would say the average person still doesn't get near that with secondary traumas. Like, I mean, not the same way shift workers would, right?
Absolutely. Well, and the statistics show it. So we see an increase in that 30% of first responders actually report post-traumatic stress injuries or having some kind of stress from the job. And that's 30% of workers out there.
And those are the ones who have an awareness.
And reported it. Think of the number of firefighters that have a bad day and they just respond, oh, I'm fine. You know, How many people don't report this or actually talk about it? I beg to differ. I think it's got to be 50% of people, if not more, at some point in their career. I mean, 300 to 600 traumatic calls, the odds are not in our favor.
It's so interesting to me, too, the shame around, like, witnessed trauma, too, because since it didn't happen to you, like, you know, in our logic brain, like, we should be fine.
Yeah, we're not entitled to our emotions around it. We aren't allowed to feel anything towards it because it didn't happen to us. Mm-hmm. So,
therefore, we should be fine. I just saw something on Instagram with September Suicide Month. There's all this... People are starting to share, right? So the background of their stories. And there was one first responder who said that, like, they just kept telling themselves the story that they were okay because otherwise he felt like shame and guilt that, well, nothing bad has happened to me, so why do I feel this way? I shouldn't. Like we said the other day, like, we shouldn't shit on ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't shit on yourself. And it's so easy for us to fall into that because we're we don't have cuts, we're not bleeding, you know, we're not impaled by something, nobody close to us, it's not happening to them, but just the fact that we are humans and we are witnessing humans together in this life, that is, the impact of that is so hard on our nervous system.
Well, imagine the analogy of somebody smoking a cigarette. Somebody lights a cigarette and they're the one that takes the drag and they inhale and that toxic effect on their body. But the secondary smoke and the exhalation of the smoke and the chemicals that come out affect anyone who's close by them. This is the same with trauma. Just because somebody else is experiencing the trauma, it's still not something that's common in everyday life, so it doesn't make sense and it overwhelms our body's ability to understand and cope in this situation, which is the definition of trauma. So it's just like secondary smoke. Just because it's not as bad as taking that initial drag, you're still experiencing the same toxins.
I think about myself 10 years ago, and if I were listening to this podcast and someone said, your body is responding in connection to things that are happening or that things that happened in the past, I can imagine myself feeling so overwhelmed by the idea of, okay, I got to deal with these stressors in my life, but also add now to the load of going back down deep and beginning to address those core memories and try and resurface, bring out these experiences, because there's a reason why they're locked down as a traumatic memory or a core memory. It had in some ways like a negative impact, where even if the situation itself, people didn't do something wrong. And I guess this is something that I think would be important to distinguish also. For me, I have found it really surprising that some of my core traumatic memories as a child, nobody did anything wrong. There wasn't someone who was actively out to hurt me and hurting me. For example, my mom, one of my core memories is when my mom was really sick, and, I'm the oldest of 10 kids, was the second caregiver, the second mom, and my twin brothers are 4 years younger than I am. So I was 6 years old at the time, and I remember so clearly my mom being in bed, sick, and she asked me to change my brother's diapers. And I remember like the fear I had of watching my mom be so sick and know that like, okay, there's no one here to take care of her. Like, this is my mom, she's my world, but like she is in harm's way. Like it felt so scary.
It sounds like you're so helpless.
And I felt so helpless. And she asked me to change my brother's diapers. And, so here I am at 6 years old, changing my 2-year-old brother's diapers, and feeling like, okay, like, am I doing this right? I don't know if, just feeling so helpless, scared, unsure. And that was a core traumatic memory for me, in the sense that now as an adult, when my mom is quote unquote not safe or not well or in a position where she's not cared for, like that activation comes up. And so we all have these kind of circumstances and memories that when we begin to go back and look at them, it's so important to remember it does bring relief in the here and now. It does bring more calm and more the ability to be at peace with ourselves and our life. But I think if someone were to have told me 5 years ago that, some of the things that I had to resolve were actually not the result of bad things happening in the way that I view them as an adult, but like just being a child and my inability to process and cope and without the support that I needed would impact me that much later.
Well, and that brings up an interesting thought for me, is there is different categories of trauma. And like you said, no one was doing anything wrong, and it's not your stereotypical trauma where you have your big abuse, the physical, emotional, sexual abuse. These are obviously traumatic events. Comparison, there's these smaller traumas that we don't talk about, but they can be as simple as, getting lost and walking away in a grocery from your parent, that helpless, scared, feeling anything that overwhelms our body's ability to understand what's happening. So for you, the question I would wonder as a 6-year-old is, who's here to help my mom? She's the one who helps me, but who helps her? So having no understanding of putting that together at 6 years old, understanding the circumstances around it, that is scary and makes us feel helpless. So now fast forward to when you see your mom sick today, right? You see your mom sick and it takes you back to that 6-year-old self where you're helpless because you can't take it away from her. She has to go through it herself. This is her experience. And how can you step up to help? Because that's what you're so used to and ingrained to do from an early age.
Yeah.
So all of this happened in our first, decade of living. Even though it affects us now, we're responding from this very young 6-year-old self. So it does feel like we're out of control and helpless, no matter what the situation is.
Yeah. So I guess what would your encouragement be for someone who is listening and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I can do that.
Nobody wants to.
Nobody wants to.
Yeah, we get to bless ourselves with the peace of mind and living after we deal with it. But one thing I would suggest before you even go back and start dealing with these traumas or finding the root cause and pulling those weeds, we have to make sure we have support in place now. We have to make sure we have a tier of support that we have for ourselves as well as an external source of support. It's really hard to go back and face a trauma, or like me, I have very adverse childhood experiences. It's really hard to go back and look at those and recover from them if my life is still chaotic today.
Yeah.
So look back 2 years ago, before I was even injured on the job, I was 6 months post hysterectomy from uterine cancer. That stress on my system enough was too much. So just getting through that time in my life, I had to do everything I could just to cope in the now. So obviously that wasn't the best time to go back and then relive and recover from the traumas before. So I think a really valid thing to do first is to look at your current living situation and your environment in which you're in. How can you make that more supportive and safe for you to be able to let down your guard and go back and actually feel your emotions in order to heal the logical part of your brain?
With regard to supports, because there are things we can do and put into place to support ourselves even before we start doing quote unquote the work. And have you read Nicole LePera's book, The Work, yet? How to Do the Work?
I have not read it.
Oh my gosh,
add it to
so
my
good.
large repertoire of books to read.
It's so good. But even before we go back and start doing the work, there are other things that we can start putting into place and practicing now, right? Like yoga. So much science has been supportive of yoga being a neurosystem regulator because of that mind-body connection that it's building. So as you do yoga, you're recognizing sensations and you're easing into them, or you're speaking to it, and
the self-compassion you give yourself, because it's an individual practice. We are not all the same flexibility, muscle tone, body shapes. We are all going to have a different experience in the same practice. So I think self-compassion, at least in my case, was developed in yoga.
I love that. Remembering like, oh, we have a bad call, like just doing a little shake thing, like releasing that cortisol and adrenaline in our system so that we have a hard reset. Like that's supportive.
Yeah, there's a reason people say shake it off.
Yes.
You know, it's no wonder it comes from something. It's not just a slang thing we say to sound cool. It's literally shake it off and out of your system.
Yeah, I do that after fake fires before I go to sleep, because I hate that. I hate that all of a sudden you're ready and then,
Well, you talk about traumatic response, right? Your body hears those tones and it's going to associate it with the 20 fires that you've had in the past with the same tones. The tone goes off, whether it's a medical call or a fire. Your body can't tell the difference when those tones hit.
Yeah.
And it's going to put you in that fight or flight activation, like pedal to the metal, floors on, let's go to work, we got a job. And then it's just to cancel, batteries chirping and they think it's their fire alarm. Well, we just got this superpower buildup of, we're flooring at 90 miles an hour down the freeway, and then we're going to quickly slam on the brakes. Our engine's going to be hot still.
Yeah.
We just worked it. So you touch the hood of a car that's been driving, it's warm. Same with our bodies. We got to be able to shake it off, downregulate, and then go into that parasympathetic.
Actively helping it give a reset. Like breath work does this too. Like it increases, like, first of all, we do it. I don't remember the statistic on how many breaths a day we take, but it's like thousands upon thousands upon thousands. We already are doing it. We can do it anywhere. It's inconspicuous. And
it's free.
It's free. There's so many different types. It increases vagal tone. It puts us back into our body. It allows us to actually hit that switch from upregulation to rest and digest. I as I'm like everybody in that, okay, I know I should do breath work. I do it before bed, but like in my daily life, I wasn't really doing it until I hit that period of real burnout. And we started using breath work to actually increase HRV. And so it was like pairing breath and movement like you do in yoga. In this case, it was walking with a type of breath work. But now I love breath work. Like I just play around with like different types of breath work. And Huberman with his podcast has so many different suggestions on different breathwork practices, but that's another support we can give ourselves that will bolster our ability to, when we start doing the work, well, then we have supports built into place that allow us to actually like, okay, we're processing. That was a really hard therapy session. All right, let's bring ourselves back into our body.
Yep, exactly. And breath work, in my opinion, is like a dimmer switch. So let's say you get activated and turned on. Breath work is like sliding that dimmer back down and dimming the lights. It's immediate, and it can be just that simple motion of holding your breaths. I know something I do throughout all day is a 4-7-8. So I inhale 4 seconds, hold my breath for 7, and then exhale for 8. And I just do 3 sets of it, and it completely resets me back to my baseline. And I can use this after a workout when I'm like really jazzed up and my heart's going, and it brings me down. I can do this when I'm really tired also, and it helps me just get into my body and I feel a little more energized. But it's like the dimmer or a dial switch, so no matter which way you need to go, up or down, it just brings you right back to your baseline. Kind of like 2 magnets coming to each other. It's like when you feel it come in, it just puts me right at my baseline, and I can just feel it. But a year ago, before I started doing these practices, I had no awareness whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think breath work is a little bit like that, where you need to try all the different styles and types. Because, I mean, in fire service, we do box breathing and the wheel breath, and we do all these practices. But I never looked at them from the standpoint of mind-body connection.
Right.
I looked at them as a survival. So for me, some breath work is actually activating or triggering. Now, as I've retired from the fire service and I'm recovering in my own traumas, doing that activation of the breath work makes my body think I'm training for survival and I'm trying to survive on a fire and conserve my oxygen. So it's actually triggering for me, and I've had to adjust my practices because of it.
That's so interesting you say that, because I've started incorporating very specific breath work in my workouts. And now when I go on a fire and I am working, I have that imprint that, oh, it's time to work, it's time to breathe in this way. And it actually has been the opposite for me with that. So it's like this really powerful way for us to use our breath to our advantage. And it's so crazy how the mind and the body work together when we have that awareness and when we practice, which is why with my retreats, I love taking people through the different kinds of breath work, because on my shelf in the back, I have the book Breath by what's his name? By James Nestor. It's this yellow book, and it's all about breath work. Guess how long I've had that book before, and I read it? Did I pay any attention to it for years? No, because we don't actually knowing about it doesn't do anything for us unless we're actually engaging and
you gotta buy
realizing
in.
it. We have to have that buy-in, exactly. And it's just different when you start doing it. And we talked about last time, taking note of, I didn't really feel anything from this type of breath work. Like, it was meant, okay, you don't feel anything? Great. Like, try something different. You might find the one that you like on the next one that's great. And then it's your one to do when you're working out, or maybe it's your one to do before you go to sleep. And that also feels really empowering to support yourself with those things. And then like we have EMDR and brain spotting and TRE, the tension release. Those, finding therapists that incorporate those things, I have found to be a game changer on the dealing with trauma, because it's not just sitting down for the 50 minutes and you're talking about it, and then you get to like the peak of the story and they say,
that's the end of our time.
Yep, we'll see you next week, and we'll pick up where we left off.
And then you're upregulated,
Yeah.
and you're having you're in that state. I love that with EMDR, like how woo-woo and bizarre it is that like just the bilateral stimulation of the eyes can help our body process what it couldn't process back then and close the loop on that trauma. I have found such a massive support and growth from EMDR. And I know you, with brain spotting, it's been kind of similar.
Very similar, yeah, same effects. It's, if I could really summarize it, it is a traumatic event, doesn't know where to be stored in your brain because it has overwhelmed our system to understand. So we have two hemispheres of our brain, our left and our right hemisphere. Well, if that memory gets stuck right in the middle because it doesn't know where to like fall into its processing to complete that loop, it just gets stuck. So you imagine EMDR or brain spotting with that bilateral movement that's connecting your left and your right brain. It's the stimulating back and forth actually takes that memory and brings it with it to file it, whether it's in the left or the right hemisphere. So you've had this loose file just sitting there in your brain for who knows how long, maybe as far as 6 years old when you witnessed your mom being sick. Well, until you feel that in your body and it can actually live the memory and complete the circuit and file it away, we're never going to have any kind of peace from it. It's going to always be sitting there, kind of like a drawer that won't shut. There's just always that paper or that folder that's keeping it from shutting. Well, let's just push it down and file it in so we can actually shut the drawer.
I found for myself that like it is very overwhelming to think about like how impacted the body is, but in the same token, if you view your body with compassion, that it has done so much for us. It has actually like carried us through all of these events and gone through all of these things. Like it is doing its best. It is showing up. It is coming in clutch for us. And going back and actually allowing ourselves to process. And I think it's important that for people to know too, it isn't always necessarily reliving the experience either. Sometimes it's just you're able to witness it. I've found with EMDR, I see myself more as witnessing the events than re-experiencing the events. I know brain spotting has kind of a similar effect often. And so with that, like recognizing this vessel that has carried us and been through so much, we can honor it in this way. And there's a book that really radically changed the way I started seeing my body, called The Wisdom of Your Body. I think her name is Hillary McBride.
I love that book. Mm-hmm.
Such an amazing book that just completely reframed my perspective on my body. And I love that she walks you through her own journey and struggles and then gives science and client stories, but ultimately that your body is so wise in what it's doing and its ultimate goal is to protect you. And that this book like really highlights the ways in which it can do that and how we can view ourselves with compassion, like a best friend, for example.
Well, we wouldn't talk to ourselves the way we do talk to our friends, our children, our parents. It's completely different.
Yeah, it really is.
Self-talk can either reinforce trauma or begin to unwind it, right? So let's say your teammate, your co-firefighter is next to you and you both had an incident and they maybe dropped something or couldn't pull their weight, right? And you had to step up and help them. When you come out of that fire scene, you're not going to berate or belittle them. Mm-hmm. You're not going to shame them and judge them critically. Now you're going to bring it up and say, hey, what's going on? Like, what happened? But the way we talk to our partner or our teammate is the way that we need to talk to ourselves. you can still hold them accountable, just like we should hold ourselves accountable. We're not saying not to do that. However, we can talk to ourselves from a little bit more compassionate lens like we would someone else.
It's been interesting for me having body dysmorphia most of my life. Well, after I read that book, I really got clear about the ways in which I was talking to myself and my body. I love when she refers to, she says she started referring to her body as her, and that like and that it was in some ways like a best friend, like a separate entity, the same, but a separate entity in the nurturing, the compassion. And I was really blown away by the thoughts, like the awareness of the thoughts of my daily experience with how I was talking to my body, and realizing that the body is witnessing and hearing and experiencing everything we say and think to it. I began to have so much profound compassion when I realized not only are you coming in clutch, but like I've kind of been treating you like
I've been a dick.
Like I've been a bitch.
Exactly. I wouldn't be friends with me.
Exactly. And then when you have that view, you're able to see that like the body is not something to be fixed, but a place to come home to. And when you are able to feel that in your heart and in yourself, it's like this amazing, peaceful, like hug that nobody else even needs to be around, and you can drop into that place, and you can, getting teary about it, you can have that feeling of like safety. Absolutely. Inside, and the journey that it took for me to actually like come to the point that I am now was so long, and there were points that it was really hard, but now like I'm so grateful, and it's so worth the process and the tears and the hardship
and the pain
and the pain and the pain
and the humility, because it really is admitting how hard we are on ourselves and then make a change. But we have to first admit that to ourselves.
It's what a journey this life is.
And it's still going.
That's the
beauty of it. Is I am so appreciative every single day of the awareness I have, because I didn't have this awareness a year ago. At the time, I wasn't aware my body was getting activated on these calls. I had no idea that was happening. It's not until I'm now, today years old, and I go back and I look at that and I think, how obvious is it? It's so obvious. How could I have not seen it? But when you're in it, you can't see it.
No, you really can't. And like now, one of my mantras whenever I feel activated is like, when I'm at work, I don't necessarily do the woo-woo, like putting hands on my heart or giving myself a hug, maybe when no one's around, but like just that, like, thank you for keeping me safe. Like, I'm here. We're okay. Like, we're going to make it through this. That's the kind of self-talk that reinforces the support that our bodies really need.
I tell myself all the time I'm okay and I'm safe. From a balloon popping at my daughter's school yesterday, I went to pick her up and I went into the classroom and the balloon popped and I immediately got dysregulated. My heart was racing. I felt on edge. I don't know if I associated it to a call or something else, but my body recognized it did not like it. And immediately in the classroom, I'm trying to hold it together and not embarrass my daughter by crying. So I'm holding it together and I simply told myself, I am safe. I am in my daughter's school. I looked around. I noticed 5 different things in the room. All of this took 30 seconds. And then I was able to show up, be authentic, be regulated, and pick up my daughter and go about her business. But had I not taken that 30 seconds, I would have been irritable and on edge, and now I'm just furthering the trauma in my body.
Yeah.
Inevitably, why? Well, why am I furthering the damage and the pain when I could just take 30 seconds to really feel it, ground myself, reestablish where I'm at in this world and that I'm safe, and then go about my day?
Well, and even like you could have looked at that with frustration too, like, oh my god,
or
like,
shame.
I'm getting activated again, and
like over nothing. Are you kidding me?
And compassion gives us the ability to like say like,
she's doing her best.
Yeah.
Like, I got you. You're doing your best. We're okay. And just the transition, I think, that can happen as a result of that. I know for me, one of the tools that I started using with my journey into sleep was body scans.
I love body scans.
Love body scans. And just being able to go from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, literally all the members of your body, and feeling into them and then releasing the tension. It is wild to me how much tension my body has carried in this life, and that even after 3 years of daily and sometimes multiple times a day doing this practice, I can be like having to still be so intentional to release tension in different parts of my body.
And that's with awareness.
And that's with awareness.
And being intentional about the practice. But you're right, it does take so much to overcompensate. I know for me, sometimes I'll try to do a body scan, or I'll do muscle tension or muscle progressive like tension and release, whatever it's called. But I'll basically squeeze my entire arm and just flex it and then release it so it actually relaxes. But I want to basically like flip my switch on and then off for it to settle in the middle. But sometimes I'll go to do that and I recognize I don't even need to squeeze, my back because it's already tense. And so then it's an awareness, I didn't know I was walking around with my shoulder earrings all tensed up. So it allows me to just, okay, now I need to relax. Take a moment, read what my body needs, and then give it to my body because it deserves it.
Give it some breathing while you're there. I love like breathing into the different parts of your body.
Especially when I have pain in those areas.
Yes.
And I found out, I might need another back surgery. So I have lots of pain right now, and that is something I'm having to do quite a bit, is just breathe into it. Every inhale, I'm breathing in like a light to that area. And when I'm exhaling, I'm just imagining my body feeling better and imagining it repairing itself. Because it actually does bring me some relief.
Well, and the body, like, it can heal itself, and it can with the right support and the relationship that you are building and that you have established there, and like that emotional connection.
Well, we've proven the power of the brain with just dreaming and focusing on a goal. Like, you think famous basketball player, right? Shooting a free throw. Just because he's not physically on the court shooting his free throw, he can picture it, and it's as if he's practicing just in his mind by remembering it and actually training his body to think about how his muscles would feel in that action.
Yeah. So when we talk about like the shaking or breathing or the body scan, what do you think is a way that we can approach it so that it doesn't feel like a chore?
Yeah, I know what you mean, because sometimes I almost need a break from myself and my own recovery. It can be like, I'm like, okay, maybe in this instant I don't need to therapize myself and I can just like be a human. But I think part of it is just listening to what it needs and doing it. Don't second guess yourself. I think that's a big part. Is I tend to go to the tool shed and open the doors and think, which tool do I need? Somatics, meditation, yoga, which one do I need? And I get overwhelmed by death by decision. Yeah. It's like paralysis. I can't make a decision. But I think just going ahead of time and actually establishing the practices you do like, and throw out the rest. Keep the best, throw out the rest. You only need the ones that work. So until you go through trial and error, find out the ones you like and keep them in your back pocket so it's not a chore. Now it's muscle memory, because okay, these 3 things work. I don't care about the rest, but one of these 3 things are going to work every time.
And maybe approaching it like PT. Like, we've all been injured. We've all had to do the dailies, morning, night, PT to like get something repaired and well. And when we're doing PT exercises, we're not like saying, darn you, body. Like, we're not like throwing shame and blame and guilt on the body. We're like, okay, just 2 more. We got this. We have this positive self-talk associated. And I see like these exercises like being PT for our nervous system and allowing it to build its capacity and strengthen it so that it can move forward in life, and we then can show up the way that we want to show up. And probably I want to add this too, not even show up for everybody else, but show up for ourselves.
Absolutely. Because no matter where we go, we are still there. Mm-hmm. And I love what you said about PT or physical therapy, because we shame ourselves over the mental side because we're supposed to be so tough. But, everything is breakable, nothing is permanent, and we don't shame ourselves if we pull a muscle. It's just the same. We're just pulling a muscle in our brain. That's all. It's just very similar. I know from my experience with PT, I tended to take it not very serious because we're doing such small movements. I'm like, this is stupid. Let's go clean and jerk some weights. I'm fine. I don't need to do this breath work and these planks. I just need to go sling some weights. But in reality, when I've actually focused in on physical therapy and recovery, if I start from those small micro movements, they become these huge macro movements later on. Yeah. But it takes having to come off my high horse and humble myself to be able to start at ground zero. Mm-hmm. And that's what I had to do after my back surgery. That's what I had to do, is start from ground zero and work on PT where I couldn't even lift my arms above my head yet. Mm-hmm. We had to start somewhere, and it was easier for me to give myself grace for the physical injury than it was for my PTSD.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense because a physical injury is seen.
Everybody can see it. They see you in pain. I've dislocated my shoulder. They could see I was in pain, and they realize, oh, that looks painful, so it must be painful. Versus you see somebody who's in dorsal vagal collapse and crying and in hysteria. We don't tend to have a lot of sympathy for them because we don't understand what's going on, and it's actually creating a response in our own body that we don't like. We don't want to be uncomfortable. So we almost want to block and not see it and not acknowledge it. Versus you have a broken bone, everybody's going to be right there calling 911, giving you support. What do you need? It's so interesting how that works.
Yeah. I am really stoked for our next podcast because this conversation has really brought up the next step of building that relationship with your body. And you and I have both been on each our own wild and involved journeys of building a relationship with our bodies. And I think it'll be really fun to talk about, as we have done that, we have actually gone through this inner landscape of ourselves and actually been able to peel back layers to accessing and showing up and being our true full selves in a way that we didn't even think was possible before.
Yeah, I love that I can show up more authentic now. It is beautiful, and I'm looking forward to the next episode just to share more practical ways of how. So we've talked about the why and what, and now moving on to the next step is the how and when. I'm looking forward to that as well.